Welcome to Screen Templates. In this session, we're going to talk about creating template-based screens. And when we create screens from templates, they're going to have some sample data. So we'll also talk about replacing that sample data and what that overall process will look like. So screen templates are pre-assembled screens that can help us implement industry best practices in just a few clicks. So there will be multiple different types of templates, and when we select a template to start a screen, we'll get an exact copy of that template. So to create a template-based screen, we just ask for a new screen, and then it will take us to the new screen wizard. The new screen wizard will show us a number of different types of templates. We can either see all of the templates or the different categories of templates that exist. Once we like one of the templates that we can see, we can go ahead and select a name and ask for that screen to be created. Once that screen is created, it will be able to be published and used immediately, just like a normal screen that we would have created from scratch. So this will hopefully make it easier to go ahead and implement screens, and we'll be able to have all of these screens and components still be editable, because everything inside of the templates is built with OutSystems UI. So we'll still be able to edit those particular patterns and any of the widgets that we're using. Now, when we look at some of the screens, we can see that some of the screens have different types of data and charts available with them. And that's because the screens come with sample data that is there just to help us visualize the user interface and understand the overall logic of the screen. We can go ahead and replace that data with our own data. So the sample data that's going to come with the template screens actually consists of several different entities. And those entities have multiple records inside of them that are related to different types of scenarios. Now the screen data will be used on multiple screens inside of the template, and this sample data is actually contained inside of its own module. So here we can see there is an OutSystems sample data database module, and it has sample departments and employees, sample offices, sample requests, as well as priorities and requests statuses. Now, if you wish to be able to see this data so that you can view it, import it, or potentially reset it, you can go ahead and view and manipulate this data by going to your particular server. So when you think of your personal environment and your URL, if you go ahead and go to OutSystems sample data, this will take you to a user interface that will allow you to view and interact with the sample data. Now, once that sample data is there, it's nice to go ahead and show us how the screen is going to work, but at some point we need to replace it with our own data. So although we may have sample customer data, we may then need to go ahead and inject our own customers' data, and the data structures might not be exactly the same. But even though that's the case, there's a fairly easy way to approach replacing data, and that is dragging your customer where you can see the sample customer has been and go ahead and drop it there. And the names don't have to be the same. In this case, our sample customer is being replaced with a regular customer, but it could have some other name. We can just drag and drop the entity to wherever we think we wish to display that data. So what happens is, once that drag and drop has occurred, it will begin the automatic data replacement cycle. And what that does is it tries to go ahead and view the data that is inside of the sample entity, and it will go ahead and then look at the real entity, and for anything that has the exact same name or similar names in the same data type, it will go ahead and map those fields together. Now, this obviously may result in suboptimal matches because occasionally it won't have any exact names and the data types may not be similar either. So there is some guesswork here that the system is doing to try to go ahead and map and associate these. Now, one thing that's really important from a mobile perspective is that the drag and drop replace data accelerator can't work with mixed data. So if we're just dealing with server data and we're replacing this with an entity or a database entity from the server, then that's going to work fine. And if we have a local piece of data that's actually being replaced by a local entity, that works. But sometimes we can actually create instances where the data coming back, some of it's from the server and some of it's local, and we can't actually have the automatic replace data accelerator work with mixed data. Now, the good news here is that this is a pretty cool feature that lets us go ahead and have a screen that has some sample data and replace it with our own data. But this also doesn't have to work with screens just based on the templates. So what this actually means is that this replace data capability not only works with the template, but if you created a screen and then all of a sudden you had a new set of data that was available that you wished to place inside of that screen, you could go ahead and do the drag and drop of your new entity onto your old entity, and the same replace data feature would attempt to go ahead and fix the data for you. Now, whether the data is coming from the template and your data, or you're updating your own data, either way, once you've done the replace data, there may be some errors and warnings that appear inside of TrueChange. And those errors and warnings will go ahead and appear because the data didn't map exactly the way we expected. Maybe there's too much data in the sample and you didn't have anything to map it to, or maybe there's too little data in the sample and some of your entities aren't being used at the moment. So occasionally we have to delete any extra data that was available in the sample and that we don't need anymore. And then in all of the other cases, we may need to check the mapping and see where the errors have occurred or what might be missing to go ahead and resolve them. So we keep checking TrueChange, and we can double click on any of the errors in TrueChange, and then it will take us to the place where there's a problem with the data. And then we can begin looking at that particular situation and figure out how to fix the data. So we talked about creating template-based screens, and that those screens will contain new sample data, and that when we want to actually make those screens ready for live production and things like that, we'd want to replace that data. And we went through all the details of how replacing the data works and how sometimes there may be some errors and we'll have to go ahead and fix those errors. So that's it for this session on screen templates. Thanks for listening.